Good morning, Bob. This morning I thought I would kind of, whatever they'd say, swing for the bleachers on the big question, which is who's responsible for the discord, the tear down of the statues, for the protests and the riots. And I had posted a small list on Facebook, and my friends responded. Three of them responded, amazingly enough, who got the most votes was Satan or the devil, even though I didn't post that as a choice.
Really? They actually said that he's responsible because they see the battle as a light versus darkness, spiritual.
Apparently so, and I had listed like Democrats, Republicans, the media, the courts, I believe. And three people came in and said it's the devil or Satan. But I had listed those, but those were some of the issues. Is it the media? Is it the Democrats, the Republicans, the Supreme Court, courts generally, whites, blacks, Black Lives Matter, and George Soros, whatever, or the funding of them? Is it the police's fault? Is it the unions? Is it austerity, too much austerity in the United States against the populace? Somebody mentioned the Illuminati. So those are basically, I guess, the culprits, and I guess we could start with the media. What do you think?
Some of the above, all of the above, or none of the above. That's a good place to start. Let me get your take.
Well, on the media, obviously we know that, well, we don't know. I shouldn't say that. Obviously there's a strong argument to be made. Stories really don't exist in the United States unless the media reports them. The average person, they don't know. We don't know what happened to this tragic killing of George Floyd, I believe his name is, unless it was presented to us. So they pick the stories.
That's true.
And they highlight the stories. If the George Floyd, now there is another angle on that now because there is social media and people have access to media now. But the question is if this tragic murder of George Floyd wasn't put on TV and wasn't pushed, are they pushing it? And then do they push related stories? And how they report it the angle.
You know, you just made a key point there, Mark, because it's how they how do I say, how they form it, how they present it.
Yes.
Because anybody that does anything now, like somebody went and took a statue of a black abolitionist, one who fought to end slavery and was killed because of it. And they didn't just talk about the statue being pulled down. They went all the way back to as a result of, and they went through the whole George Floyd story again. You know, so they're connected.
They could keep these stories going.
Yes.
They could ignore what they want. And obviously, we know, I went on CNN last night, some of the research for the show, and it was just one Trump article after another, negative Trump article, which is, obviously ridiculous. And even though I wasn't happy the way President Obama was treated, this is even more extreme than that. So that's ridiculous. And I'll give you another example of the media. I go into the office the morning that that church was burned. The morning after the church was burned in Washington, D.C., and the first thing the secretary says to me is how awful it was that Trump made a photo op of this church, which burned up. I didn't even know the church burned up, but the story was not the photo op of Trump or Trump walking with a Bible in front of the church. The story was the church being burned by protesters. That's the story.
Yeah, but they didn't talk about the story mainly because not only did they burn it that night, which is why he went over there, but the bishop, the woman bishop over that church actually attacked Trump as well.
I know. And they highlighted that.
But did you know
that?
But
the story nonetheless was this vagrancy in the Capitol, which hasn't occurred, I don't believe, I don't know. I can't remember the severity of the 60s protest movement in Washington, D.C. But I don't think a church was burned up across the street. Right?
No. They didn't burn churches in the 60s. And in fact, out of the 60s came a Jesus movement. I don't know if you know that or not. A lot of them began to follow and do the whole joke about the Ignatowski. You ever see Taxi, the situation?
Yes, I thought Jim. Not a lot, but I thought it was a very good show.
Yeah, but Jim Nikowski had been a Jesus freak hippie.
Yes.
After dropping out of Harvard based on drug use.
Well, and I brought that up regarding the hippies. I said, well, the hippie women were very feminine and very kind and tolerant.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't intolerant. Like now we have people on the left, they're intolerant. If you say you're a Christian or you say you're Catholic or you say you go to the Latin Mass, they think you're awful. They hate you. They don't want to have a discussion with you. So it's a totally different than the way it was in the 60s. So we have, the media, and obviously, I'll go backwards, and I think I mentioned it on the show before. There used to be a fairness doctrine before Reagan basically got rid of it or was gotten rid of during his administration. So on a major issue, if they said something about Trump's administration regarding whatever masks, he'd be able to go on television, even in a non-elect year. You were entitled to equal time in an election, but you're also entitled on major issues. You don't have that now. So they just say whatever they want. And Donald Trump or whoever cannot respond. So the media, I think the media panders obviously to violence. And I will say this, in my personal experience, it's not only the angle. They'll lie blatantly. I've had trials that were covered that were totally inaccurate representations of what occurred at that trial. Totally inaccurate. But again, that might have to do with the courts. The standard for suing them is very strong. I'm sorry.
On
go ahead.
Monday, no, don't apologize. It'll be better once you get in the studio again. Once you get in the studio, it'll be a lot easier to do the back and forth. But it's a little difficult via the phone. But I had the sheriff of Nueces County on Monday. And the Carlo Times reported that he had been presented a list of demands signed by 8 organizations and 82 individual people. He doesn't have that. At the end of their meeting with him, they handed him a paper. It's just, regular 8.5 by 11. There's no letterhead on it. There's 3 type names, one of which includes the Democratic Socialists of America, Corpus Christi chapter, demanding him that he sever all ties, not only with ICE, but with all federal agencies, which includes the FBI and everybody else, DEA. But they wrote that story and said that he hadn't responded to their efforts to talk to him, but none of it is true. But that's the narrative that they put forth. Which means when I read something like today's New York Times, you know what the headline says, Mark?
No.
It says, why does Trump put Russia first? With a question mark. And guess who wrote it?
Ridiculous.
Susan Rice. Susan Rice. Who,
you mean the
former advisor to President Obama.
Oh, okay. Susan Rice.
Yes, Susan Rice actually wrote it. It's in the New York Times. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's another aside regarding the Obama administration's failing to step back. Whether in particular President Obama, I've never seen an ex-president who's made so many vocal remarks against the new administration. And let me tell you something. I've said this before on the show. I voted for President Obama twice. But now what I've got to say is President Obama is, you had 8 years, man. And I don't think you did a very good job for the inner cities, for African Americans. I don't think you did a very good job. I didn't see any decisive steps taken. So why don't you sit back and enjoy your retirement, because you had your shot, and it's easy to be an armchair quarterback. So I've never seen another administration like that. But let's go to the next topic besides the media. I have here the Democrats. Are the Democrats responsible for the riots and saying something or protests or the destruction of statues? I was talking to a friend of mine last night, and I said, I guess they are. I said, because I don't think you see any Republicans, conservatives rioting. I don't think they're tearing down statues, and I don't think they're throwing paint, right? I think it's primarily a Democratic or leftist movement. Is that correct?
Which one?
Well, the protests in the streets, the defacement of the statues and tearing down on the statues.
Well, sure.
I don't think that's a Republican movement. I don't have any Republican friends that are saying, yeah, they're right. Yeah, tear down the statues. Yeah, yeah. So I think to a certain extent, one could argue that they are responsible for this discord
Well,
in the
and, and,
streets. Is
and
that
if you
right?
look at the cities, well, yeah, I would go further. Remember in Baltimore, they've had a series of mayors. In fact, the last three mayors all had to resign because of corruption. And I think two of the last three were female, black female, to say. But when they were rioting in Baltimore about the Freddie Gray situation, the mayor actually went on TV and says that we're going to give them some space. Those who want to do violence and stuff, we'll give them some space. And I'm saying, give them some space. And they were burning up black folks' stores and athletic apparel stores and looting and stealing. She said, we're going to give them some space. Nobody but a Democrat mayor could ever say something like that and the media not make a big deal out of it. Nobody.
Well, yeah, I would agree. There's a certain point. Obviously, the right to peacefully protest and assemble is a right. And at what point do you step in? And it would appear, and Trump has come out and said this, he referred to him, I don't necessarily agree with the way he said it, I'm going to track down in jail for 10 years the two anarchists who threw red paint on the George Washington statue.
Well, he put them out. The police, the Capitol Police or the somebody police, they've got wanted posters. They got these black people, white people, they got them all, women, they got their pictures, and they got them on wanted posters. I don't know if you knew that. Of the text messages that have been coming in from people who are thinking about things that Mark Carlo was talking about with this edition. Peter says, this is the most important topic. He said, the folks and kids here are totally innocent. I went through similar times in South Africa with communist insurgency and arms infiltration. That is why I'm here in the United States, the USA, and I'm most concerned for our freedom and future. I saw the beginnings in South Africa. South Africa was taken over by similar communist groups still going today, he says. Here's another one. This one came in from Valentine.
Let me just say that's very interesting. I'm not that familiar with the history. That's a very complicated subject, and obviously South Africa is no better off now than they were before, and are much worse. Much of Africa is arguably much worse since the English left, unfortunately.
Valentine says, as far as doing the homework, people don't read anymore. They'd rather be handed information and rebel on what someone else is telling them than to discover the truth of it all. Okay, Black Lives Matter, but do they really matter to those who support it? Or are they using as a front, like everything else, to get what they want? Many people are continuing to ride the backs of the 97% hardworking folks like yourself and those paying tax dollars, including me. Sean says, hate to say it, but civil war is coming. Richard says, can you give me an example of any Republican or conservative riots? I'm 70 and I don't remember any. He's responding.
Yes, I can. I can. Arguably during the Bush Jr., I think that was the Gore election. Do you remember when the Republicans went in there and insisted on the counting of the ballots be stopped in Florida? Do you remember? That was a little demonstration. Maybe not a riot exactly. You recall that?
But we're talking about a demonstration versus a riot. The last time I saw people demonstrate that were, i.e., let's say, conservative or to the right, was up in, I think, Michigan when Whitmer was closing stuff down. And the way they marched, they had guns, but they had flags and parades. They weren't throwing paint on stuff, spray painting, pulling down.
No. I think his point is well taken, generally. I was pointing out perhaps an exception that proved the rules. I think his point is well taken. I think that's true.
Jeff says, active Marxism is illegal and adverse to a constitutional democratic republic. Now to stand up. But you're saying, first of all, before people can go on to all of this, I hear you. This is about the Zimmerman thing. Okay, here's the point, Mark. You're right. We don't think about, if we don't know how this stuff gets started or where the sources are coming from, or let alone the agitation and whatnot, then we're just stuck reacting. Is that what your point is? We're merely
Well, I mean,
reacting.
I think nobody is. That's exactly right. That's actually deeper than the way I thought of it. I just thought generally. I said, who is responsible? Who's responsible? Somehow we got a problem,
Mm-hmm.
and somehow the problem got started by someone. And all these points are arguable. I think, my next point was going to actually Black Lives Matter was going to be one of the reasons for on my list. But I was going to say next, in fairness to the Democrats, I was going to say, are the Republicans responsible?
Okay, go ahead.
Have they, for many, many years we heard, get tough on crime, get tough on crime. Do away with this. Do away with this due process right. Do away the. Oh no, that confession. These are legal technicalities. We got to put all these people in prison. Did they force things too much on that issue?
But the biggest thing on that was during the Clinton years when they came up with the 3 strikes and all. But let me say this: not only did Clinton,
there was a lot of that, and Biden was largely responsible for the long incarcerations for the 1992, I believe it was.
But in some fairness to the Clinton administration, who fought against that to the extent black communities were asking for these people to be taken off their streets. Remember, that coincided with the crack cocaine epidemic?
It did.
It was turning people, mothers and housewives, into zombies, prostituting themselves for a rock and a crack, and it was devastating the black community, and they wanted these people off their streets, which is why they were in jail for drug dealing. Black communities wanted them in there, and ultimately Clinton gave in with some of the toughest incarceration policies that there was. So
I didn't recall that regarding the black communities, but
I'm telling you,
I didn't recall that.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it was bad. And then you can use it either way, which is the political thing. Use how you're going to use the information and distort the facts. And he's saying the chaos, the disconnect, the looks like anarchy and the statues and all this mess that's going on. He's saying who's to blame, who's responsible. I mean, who foments it? Who twists it? Who bends it?
And I had a bunch of people listed. We're talking about the Republicans, but I kind of want to go to the next topic, which is people are saying it's the police. Is it the police that have started it by their constant abuses of civil liberties, by them shooting people in the back when they're running away, by the death of this George Floyd? Are they responsible for this? And who empowered the police? Was it the police unions? I remember in the 60s we're in the police, and even though kind of a counterculture person myself, I never approved of calling them pigs, never approved of that. I knew they were mostly working class people trying to make a living, but that was a common term, the pigs. But it would seem like the calls for police brutality then were basically co-opted, and they said, "Oh, these are our men in blue," and there was kind of a false sort of patriotism wrapped over the police departments, which we've seen lately with all first responders, ambulance, etc. Was that healthy?
But
is it the police? Is it their union, Bob?
Well, and again, I'm more inclined to whatever it is. There is somebody that is manipulating the situation, because if you want to know the truth, police shoot white people in the back. Police.
Actually, there was a big case in Dallas about 3 years ago.
His name is Tampia. The guy Tampia. The police put their knee in his back, just like they did George, and held it there, and he died.
Yes.
He actually
and they chose not. That's another. They could have promoted that story. They could have made that a media celebre, right?
They did not.
But they did not. So, and that's true. And then none of this is reported correctly. I'll say something that you'll never hear anyone say, and it's terrible to say in a way. You and I are from up north, right?
Yep.
Philadelphia, Northeast Ohio. You know as well as I do that many blacks preyed on white citizens in these cities. And sometimes they were hate crimes. They may not call them that, but it was very common. Black on white violence in many of the Northeast industrial cities was very severe, wasn't it?
But I'll even take another step. Not only did that happen, but also what is worse is black on black crimes.
And that's another
is
issue,
10,000 times worse than anything else. I gave a name earlier, I think maybe last week when I was on the show. I took 2015, just the year 2015, okay? One single year, and chose at random, looking at random, the amount of police killings involving unarmed white people. And I listed a name, a guy named Timothy Smith, killed by a police officer who thought he was reaching into his waistband to grab a gun. Shooting was ruled justified. Another white guy, this is just 2015, William Lemon, killed after he allegedly failed to show his hands upon request. The shooting was ruled justified.
Well, I'm going to say something though on the other side of that too. I mentioned this in a previous show. You know, these this one, the killing after George Floyd and the George Floyd killing is, you know, these black guys, they were winning. They were beating up the cops, and I think that's why the cops overreacted. So I think the cops, they better get a little bit tougher, and they better start being in a little better shape or something, because that's not a job where you're supposed to be scared out of your mind. And it appears that's the case. And as I told you on one of the previous shows, I think feminism is part of it, because they reduce the physical requirements for these police officers.
Oh, man, they jumped on Philadelphia Police Chief Frank Rizzo when they first started bringing women into the police department. He said, I'm in a bar, breaking up a fight in a bar, and I get attacked by these guys, about 6'4", 6'5", there's 4 of them, and I call for officer need assistance, and they send a 5'2" woman. And, man, he was castigated for making that comment.
And you knew Frank Rizzo, didn't you, Pop?
I knew him very well.
Yes, I didn't. By the way, I wasn't a fan of Frank Rizzo. I thought he was a little bit, but I wasn't a fan of Frank Rizzo. Didn't they take that? Did he have a statue and they took that down recently?
They recently took it down, his statue of Frank Rizzo in the city. And the thing about it is, he was labeled by the mainstream media as a racist. But when Frank Rizzo ran again and switched parties as a Republican, 150,000 white and other Democrats switched over. He won the Republican nomination. I had people come to me, including members of the Philadelphia Black Muslims and all of them, that wanted meetings with him because they came to the conclusion that only bad guys had to be afraid of him, that he was a law and order guy.
There was a sheriff, and I believe he was also Italian. That Sheriff Arpaio, was that New Mexico?
No, Arizona, I think.
Arizona. Very similar situation. They said this and they said that, but I don't think the man was a racist in any means. He was just trying to do his job.
Yeah,
I think he was
like I said,
President
which
Trump.
goes back to what you said again about who's at fault for all of this unrest, lack of understanding, lack of civility, almost a great divide that looks like a chasm that nobody can cross. Who is it?
It does. And one of the things I wanted to talk too about the police unions, and I worked in a couple of factories up north going through college, a steel mill, et cetera. And my father was a factory worker. And one of the problems you have with the unions, we may have brought this up before, is they protect the worst workers.
Police unions even protect bad police, and teachers union protects bad teachers.
So I mean, why that? Why don't they protect the medium teachers, the good teachers? Why is it always the worst element that they protect? I've never understood that.
Yeah, you do. The good teachers, the medium teachers ain't in trouble. They don't have that situation.
well, that might be true. That might be true. And there's always some unfairness, but in all honesty, in particular, when you have a civil service organization, that should be enough, I think, to protect the police without the overlay of the union. And I think that the police unions are not necessarily serving the interest, as as we're implying, of the average honest police officer or average honest school teacher. Is that a fair statement in your opinion?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Let me give you another text. Leanne, the people responsible for all these riots are the teachers in colleges, she says.
And I had that, I think, too.
Right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You did have that. Civics is not taught in school. God is out of school. Parents who don't teach their kids that patriotism is not only in your heart, it has to be taught. We are all responsible for what the schools have done to the kids, but the Democrats are for all of this, so they are to blame for sure. Conservatives do not tear down statues, talk bad to cops. These people are vulgar, always using the F word. Their party is totally not what it used to be. See, that's another thing.
Well, that's obviously the truth.
That's right, and they are to blame for that. The silent majority has got to speak out, but then they're to blame too. It may be too late. I'm mad about how they feel about the best country in the world, and it came from Leanne. Eric, good morning. You're on with Mark DeCarlo.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to ask Mark a question. If he thought that contributing to some of the discord in America is due to the fact that most of the media has abdicated from non-biased journalistic integrity in their coverage of news and politics, especially when it comes to Trump.
I think that's a serious problem. But this goes back, for years. And as I said earlier in the show, it has to do with the fairness doctrine, them getting away with the fairness doctrine. So they no longer have the obligation to even be fair. And Fox News, which I think is one of the better news reporting agencies now, Fox News, as I believe, was on the cutting edge of this biased journalism. Now they seem a lot, so yeah, I think the media is very bad, and you may have a legitimate point that this constant drumbeat against President Trump, not only being juvenile, is not healthy for the country. But we don't have a regulatory mechanism in place to get these news media in line now.
I'll give you a follow-up comment, Eric. Go ahead.
No, go
ahead. I'm finished.
Back when you said something about the Republicans having some kind of a revolt back during Bush.
Yes.
When Al Gore was the vice president, did he have to oversee the electoral count, the one that he lost?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
He's talking about Al doing the count, but what does that have to do? What's your point there, Eric?
Well, I was wondering if he had done it because originally he had given in, conceded the election, and then he had come back and said no.
Yes, he did that.
But let me just say this. Let me just say this. The bottom line was the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Tribune, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Los Angeles, all of those agencies got together and actually counted all the votes. They went down, the news agencies, the main, counted all of them and said George Bush would have won if they had given Al Gore a dimple jab.
I know that you say that, but I don't know if I totally believe that.
Well, I got the story. I'll give it to. I'll send it to you. I got the news article.
Let's go to some other topics.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric. How about the austerity programs, Bob? Has that helped us? With the number of people that we have on the street now is an unaddressed problem. And I don't hear about our Democrat Biden talking about it, and I don't hear Trump talking about it. Is that the result of cutting taxes for the rich year after year, cutting back on social welfare programs, food stamps, etc., welfare year after year? Have they gone too far in pushing the American people? Is that causing this revolt in the streets and this resentment and animosity? What do you think about that?
Well, John F. Kennedy did the same thing that Trump did. He cut taxes, and he said that cutting taxes for the people gave them more money in their pockets that they would spend and therefore create jobs, and that the corporations, the more money they had, they would go into expanding, which also creates another job.
That's an argument, but here we had it under Reagan, we had it under Bush Jr., we have it under President Trump, who I voted for, by the way, but I disagreed with him doing that. I don't know necessarily that these trickle-down austerity programs are helping the average American, and I think you could make it too tough on them.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. See, and that's the problem. You got so many, you got so many balls in the air.
Well, I know, and then I think the other way too. I think, and Trump finally said it. I said, well, Trump's idea to get unemployment down so low, I said that's pretty good because this is a pretty good country if you could get a job.
That's right.
As a matter of fact, the socialists, one of the idea of the socialists years ago in the 20s, et cetera, was they wanted 0% unemployment. So Trump had almost achieved that. I believe practically he had. Now, whether or not these jobs paid enough, whether or not, it was still too tough having a job is another issue.
When you have
but that was pretty good.
When you have that many jobs and that many people working, then you have to pay more than minimum wage to get any quality workers. So that's another effect that low unemployment has. Richard, Senator Tex says the liberals in our universities are indoctrinating the young people due to tenor that they get away with anti-American rhetoric without repercussions. A lot of them are talking about the university setting and the ones that are teaching our indoctrinating our kids. Is the universities and the education system part of one of your things to consider, Mark?
Well, I don't know that was on the list, but I do think that's an issue. We had discussed before how you and I both went to private colleges, and I could say that I've been to private grade schools, I've been to public schools, I've been pretty much both, and personally, I much prefer the private institutions. And I would say that one of my issues was the courts. Are the courts causing this problem? The United States Supreme Court recently made, as of yesterday, finally made a decision that was pro-parochial or religious education after, I think that was in Missouri, after years of basically abrogating, that what they've done over the period of years is they've increased your property taxes again and again. They've increased teachers' wages. They've increased the facilities wherein you could not. They taxed you so much that you couldn't really afford. You didn't have the discretionary spending or the extra money to send your kid to a private school, and they didn't give you tax benefit. They didn't give you a tax benefit to send them to the private school.
Can I ask you a question? Does it appear though? Since President Trump has talked about this executive order and sending in troops and putting out wanted posters, does it seem that some of this turmoil has died down, or is the media just not telling us about it, but it's still going on?
Well, I mean, I don't know that you could say it could be that that's a causal effect. But I said to several people, I said, look, in all honesty, this stuff is probably going to die down, but we don't know. Mm-hmm. We don't know what's going to happen. Probably will die down, but we don't know. So I don't know if there's a cause and effect on that. I wanted to hit real major issue that I told you. 3 people said on my Facebook account, they said it was Satan, that's causing these problems, as we said at the beginning of the program. And one of the other issues that I had was somebody said the Illuminati, which is one of these conspiracy theories that. And obviously, we know some of that is true.
Yeah, those are globalist organizations, secret cult. Like the Bilderbergs.
We do know some of it's true that some of these foundations, such as the
Bilderbergs.
Yes, and foundations connected to George Soros, which I never really believed until I looked into them. There's a certain amount of truth in that. I think that was the Firestone Foundation, gave Black Lives Matter a great deal of money. So some of these foundations and/or corporations, et cetera, are filtering money into Black Lives Matter, et cetera. And that gets into court decisions, too, because I think it was one of the Supreme Court decisions said you don't have to release the donators to these PAC funds, et cetera. But how much of this is being funded secretly? How much, you hear of the Council of Rome, you hear of the Illuminati, you hear of, and there seems to be some legitimacy regarding these groups, correct? They do meet. Bilderbergs, they do meet. And it seems like, as you're saying, now we use the term globalist, which is for people, now, for example, they're talking about doing away with the Star-Spangled Banner and putting up John Lennon's song, Imagine, sing at the baseball games, football games, sporting events. And I told somebody, I said, that song, Imagine, totally anti government or sovereignty rant. I said, that is the worst song I think I've ever heard in my life.
It's not just anti-governor, anti-sovereign, it's anti-Christian. It says the first sentence is, imagine there's no heaven.
Yes, what kind of thing is that to say?
Imagine
which is code, in a way, imagine there's no good or evil.
That's right. And no borders, and no religion, and no borders, then the world can live as one. Oh,
I mean, and then what we've seen is we've seen this extreme. No men or no women. And a blurring the line between men and women.
Well, that's what Black Lives Matter has as their objective. Did you know that on their website?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
That Black Lives Matter on their website say we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement.
I didn't know that, and I looked at their website. I guess I didn't read thoroughly enough, but I think that's just terrible. And I think some of these, there's very ancient African countries with great heritage. What are they saying about their own heritage?
Listen, it's the African Catholic bishops that are fighting against homosexuality in the Catholic Church.
I know. And we had talk of this one African becoming our pope, and many of I shouldn't laugh. Many of us that are on the conservative side, I'm not as well read as some of my other Catholic brethren, but they were very much proponents of him becoming the Pope. And many of us are very disappointed in Pope Francis, who from South America, of an Italian ethnic group, has been a grave disappointment. And that's another issue I have thought, though I've never said publicly before. When we lost the Catholic Church, have we lost Western heritage, and have we lost Western culture? And was the loss of the Catholic Church through even Pope Francis, and is exhibited by other softening of his stand regarding morals? Is that the problem? One of my ex-girlfriends, or a girl I had dated for a while, said, "Mark, you've got to end this show with a prayer. You've got to end it with a St. Michael prayer." And I said, "I'll give you one line." Anyway, St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. Then I'll give you one line during the show. So I did doing that for her. But that's an issue too. Have we lost the Western world generally and Western belief and values?
And that is a scary notion, because it was the Western world that opened the door for science and everything else.
And it's the way we're living. It's our language. It's our alphabet. It's our culture. It's
That's right.
It's everything that we know.
Which is why the Archbishop of the Catholic Church, Vigano, wrote a letter to Trump and said, this is a battle between the children of light and the children of darkness. That is really a spiritual battle going on.
Yes, I'm familiar with Vigano, and
Mark,
many of the conservatives
as always,
are in favor.
Exhaustive,